All right, so this was just released like 5 hours ago. It's the leaked version of the 14-point ceasefire plan between the U.S. and Iran, and so we're going to go over it really quick. Number one, an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. I've talked about this before. That's a complete non-starter, right? It's the Israel is not going to stop fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? Rightfully so, because Hezbollah is a serious threat to Israel's peace and security and sovereignty as a nation. Because one of Hezbollah's clear stated goals is the destruction of Israel and the killing of all the Jews there. So Israel, regardless if their actions in Lebanon and Gaza and Syria and in the region in general over the last however many years or decades is righteous and justified or not, it doesn't change the reality of the situation that like there's not going to suddenly stop fighting Hezbollah at the same time that Hezbollah is not going to suddenly stop fighting Israel. And so that's, as far as I understand, almost a complete non-starter is this the end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, right? And I also like how Iran doesn't even try and pretend that that Hezbollah isn't a proxy of theirs anymore, right? I'm pretty sure they used to at least pretend that like, oh, we don't have any connection to Hezbollah. They're doing their own thing, guys. We may just sort of agree with them, but they're not our proxy. But like, this is just a complete acknowledgement. Like, okay, yeah, they're our proxy. We're not going to try and pretend anymore. Number two, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. Okay, yeah, this just seems like sort of an extension of like number one. Like I'm pretty sure like number one and number two seem like pretty standard things that you'd have in some sort of a ceasefire agreement, right? This is pretty standard warning, like we're gonna leave you alone, guys, if you leave us alone, sort of thing. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States undertake to negotiate and reach a final agreement within a maximum period of 60 days, extendable by mutual consent. Extendable by mutual consent. I'm sure they're like I predicted in the earlier coverage of the Iran, this in continuation of the Iran ceasefire or whatever, ceasefire, even though no firing was actually ceased in that time period, that like it wouldn't surprise me if they continue to extend this period of time conveniently through the midterms, because ultimately I think this is what this is all about, right? The only reason that the Trump administration and the Republicans ultimately are wanting to do this now is because they understand that like high domestic gas prices in the United States hurt their chances electorally come the midterms. And so if they can bring them back down to normal for the month or two prior to the midterms actually happening, bring them back down to what they otherwise would be, I say normal, otherwise would be without this conflict, then and they could stabilize the global oil markets, then it will likely help their chances electorally by a couple of percentage points come the midterms. And so that seems to me to be the clear reason for all of this. For that very reason, it wouldn't surprise me if they extend it past the 60-day mark and conveniently extend it a couple of more months until after the midterms, when all of this could potentially just fall apart because there's no more immediate reason to go after this sort of thing. Number four, the United States lift the naval blockades and prevent any interference or obstruction against the Islamic Republic of Iran and restore traffic within a maximum of 30 days to its full capacity. The traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume of traffic on the part of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States also undertakes to withdraw its forces from the surrounding areas within 30 days after the final agreement. Now, my understanding when I first saw about all this ceasefire stuff and the potential reopening of the strait or whatever, like they've been saying the strait's open now. Well, it's not actually open yet. Not only did the Iranian National Guard or whatever come out like yesterday and say, nobody move, nobody go through, you still haven't got authorization yet, but like they still have to do a bunch of demining efforts and they have to move all of like the naval ships out of the area and whatnot. Like it's not like it's not like they can snap their fingers and then it will go right back to that full, to the full pre-war shipping volume, right? It's very possible. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if it takes more than 30 days to get back to its full capacity. That like that whole demining process and all that nonsense could take far longer than that amount of time. So, I don't know, but this seems like sort of just a general, pretty generic extension of number 1 and 2 from of this agreement. Number 5, the Islamic Republic of Iran will immediately take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa is resumed within 30 days of the pre-war volume, taking into account the need for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralization of mines by Iran. Number 6, the United States undertakes, together with its regional partners, to create a comprehensive plan agreed upon by both parties for the rehabilitation and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran, while ensuring financing of at least $300 billion. So this is part of the actual agreement, even though Trump said there's no plan for us to give them $300 billion. It's part of the plan. The implementation mechanism of this plan as part of the final agreement will be formulated within 60 days. So to me, this seems like Iran is going to make out better now than they were pre the war, right? I have a hard time believing that the United States did and Israel did over $300 billion worth of damage to Iran's infrastructure and industrial capabilities and whatnot during the 107 days of war, right? They probably did far, far less than that. And so this is essentially a W for Iran. And in that sense, it's kind of a loss for the United States, right? Are these surrender terms? Are these arguably like surrender terms on the part of the United States, right? Like that seems clearly like they are trying everything they possibly can to get Iran to agree to a ceasefire. And that's what makes me think like maybe they're just going to continue. They're going to extend all of this to 60 days, right? Maybe even the Trump administration has no intentions of providing them with any sort of financing or $300 billion or anything like that, or facilitating that sort of thing, even if it's through outside investors or that sort of thing, right? Maybe they have no interest in doing that, but they're interested in making it appear like there's a ceasefire or agreement happening before the midterms so they can stabilize the oil markets and at least get some oil flowing before the midterms through the strait. And so, yeah, the idea that like, especially if any of the funding comes directly from U.S. taxpayers or from money that the U.S. tax system otherwise would have gotten, goes towards this program would be absolutely disgusting. At the same time that this Trump administration and the Republicans just outright freaking refuse to do any sort of like program for the American people, right? They want to cut Medicare, Medicaid. They want to cut Social Security. They don't want to do anything for the homeless. They don't want to really do anything about the cost of living. They don't want to make food cheaper. They don't want to make housing cheaper. They don't seem very interested in any of those things at all. So, or any sort of program that helps America. They don't want to fund public schooling properly. And so, like, yeah, especially if they just give them direct cash payments from taxpayer dollars or whatever, that would be absolutely disgusting. Yeah, I have a hard time imagining that's what they're wanting to do, but you know what? It would not surprise me if these are basically sort of terms of surrender, conditions of surrender from the United States and Israel to just get the oil markets back on track so they can do well in the midterms in 5 months or whatever. Number 7, the United States commits to ending on a schedule to be agreed upon as part of the final agreement all types of sanctions currently facing the Islamic Republic of Iran, including resolutions of the United Nations Security Council and the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, both primary and secondary. My understanding is that a number of these sanctions and restrictions and whatnot were in place prior to the initiation of this war 107 days ago or whatever, right? That Iran had been violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act and all sorts of other things for years now. That there's a reason why that various economic sanctions have been in place for them for years, why their ability to acquire certain nuclear types of materials, the resources necessary to potentially put together a nuclear bomb have been restricted from them. So yeah, this is reading more and more like a W in favor of Iran and not so much a win in favor of the U.S. I don't know if you'd call it terms of surrender from the U.S., in Israel, but like if all of this is correct and pans out in the way even close to the way it's being worded here, this is clearly a win for Iran, and at best is like a soft loss for the U.S. and Israel, but at worst is like just a straight up surrender and bending of the knee for clear political reasons. When I say political reasons there, that seems kind of silly because obviously this is all geopolitics, but you know what I mean, for internal domestic political reasons. Number 8, the Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates that it will never produce nuclear weapons. I just have a hard time imagining that like Iran is just now, for whatever reason, just totally done with trying to acquire their own nuclear weapons, right? Maybe they've already acquired them and they're just like, yeah, we've got a couple now. We don't really need to make any more. Or they're just like basically like this is all lip service and that they fully intend to in the future restart their nuclear program, nuclear uranium enrichment, and continue to march on the path towards having a nuclear weapon, right? I just have such a hard time imagining that Iran all of a sudden is a favor of nuclear disarmament on part of themselves, and that they're all of a sudden just down with like not having any nuclear weapons and promise we promise, guys, we won't do it anymore in the future. We promise, guys, we will never try again. We would never do that. There's no way. Okay, this seems just like number 8 just seems like lip service to me. Number 9, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States agree that, pending a final agreement, they will maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program, and the United States will not impose new sanctions on Iran or strengthen its forces in the region. So if Iran does something to violate, to like be really bad, and like there's a good reason why the United States would want to implement new sanctions on them, in the future, that like that would suddenly violate all of this whole agreement. And like this just seems like a provision that's like waiting to be, be the pretext for which the whole agreement is torn up at some point in the future. Number 10, the United States Treasury Department will issue waivers for exports of Iranian crude oil, petrochemical products and their derivatives, and all related services, including banking, insurance, transportation, and the like. Number 10 just seems to be sort of an extension of number 7 and the lifting of sanctions and their ability to engage in like the global economy in various different ways, like they said, including banking, insurance, transportation, and the like, the crude oil, petrochemical products, and their derivatives and whatnot. So yeah, 10 just seems to sort of be like an extension or a copy of number 7. Number 11, the frozen or restricted funds and assets of the Islamic Republic of Iran will be released and made fully available. These funds, whether held in the master account or transferred, will be used for any final beneficiary payment determined by the Central Bank of the Islamic Republic of Iran and will be fully available for use. So, like, unless there's some specific provision that says this can't be used for funding of the proxies, right? Iran could just turn around and give this money to Hezbollah, or at least some of it to Hezbollah, use some of it to fund their proxies, right? Which would be obviously hilarious that the U.S. would unfreeze a number of these assets, number of these bank accounts and whatnot, just so that Iran can turn around and use them to fund Hezbollah or fund proxies in various countries in the region, and fight the U.S. interests, U.S. allies, or Israel, or whatever it may be. I just don't see how any of this like fits with the long-term Republican project, conservative project of the United States to like really stick it to Iran, right? None of this seems to be doing that, right? In fact, if all of this comes to fruition, it's just going to be emboldening them and putting them in better footing worldwide as far as economics goes, as far as sovereignty goes, as far as everything goes, than they were pre the initiation of the war 107 days ago or whatever. Number 12. Okay, yes, that's just like that's basically a copy of number 1 through 4, right? That's a pretty generic part of a ceasefire agreement that you sort of expect. Number 13, okay, yes, that also just seems like a pretty generic, like we're doing the ceasefire, guys, and like this is kind of tying up loose ends, and you guys better do it. Oh, you better do it. We're gonna do things to make sure you do it. Yeah, we're gonna do things to make sure you do it too. And number 14, the final agreement will be approved through a binding resolution of the UN Security Council, of which I can't imagine any of them would vote no on. I don't really know if that means anything, right? Like, I don't understand why they would even bring the UN into this at all. Maybe it's to make it seem like it's all more legitimate and holds more weight. Maybe so Iran can go to the UN if the U.S. Violates the ceasefire at some point in the future, or violates this agreement, and go to the UN and be like, hey, guys, look, the U.S. is violating the agreement. Guys, do something about it. See, yeah, the funniest part about this is that the $300 billion thing is in there, even though Trump said like a day ago, like, no, it's not, when he was asked about it. It's not in there. We're not giving them any money. And so, yeah, I wonder if there's a huge disconnect maybe in the negotiation room between what Iran expects of this $300 billion restitution reparations funds that's clearly mentioned in this agreement, and that, like, I'm sure, I saw reporting about in other sources. And there's got to be a reason why it was being reported on, right? And so the idea that like Trump was going to go out and completely deny that it's a thing is hilarious. So yeah, to me, this reads more and more like a loss on the part of the U.S., right? It makes you question, what was the freaking point of all of this, right? We lost a ton of resources. I'm sure this cost a lot of money. I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands, of American servicemen have died. A number of our allies have undertaken attacks by Iran as a result of all of this, right? The Kuwait International Airport, places in Dubai have been struck. It just makes you question all what was the point of all of this, right? And they already, Trump came out and, you can't really take his word for much, but he came out like a week ago or a few days ago and said regime change was not the plan in Iran, which was the only like reasonable, and it's not like a good idea, right? Regime change has proven to not really work in that region every time we've tried it over the last however many decades. But that was one of the only reasons I could come up with for the whole purpose of all of this, right? Maybe they come in, they kill the supreme leader Ayatollah or whatever, they install their own puppet dictatorship, their own puppet government, their own puppet president or leader or supreme leader or whatever. That's more favorable to U.S. interests, but that doesn't seem to be what's happened, and they said they're not interested in that, so I don't really understand what the point of all of this was, and it's just seeming more and more like this is a loss, like this is almost like a surrender in some ways on the part of the U.S., and that like in terms of like the long-term Republican conservative goal in the U.S. to sort of stick it to Iran, this sort of seems to be doing the exact opposite, right? If all of this comes through, if they actually get that $300 billion in funding, if they actually are able to regain a number of these frozen funds that have been frozen for years, if sanctions are being lifted, and some of these sanctions were in place prior to the initiation of the war, that like all of this is going to put Iran on better footing worldwide, economically and whatnot, politically, than it did before. And so, and especially if they get the UN to back this, and be the ones to punish the U.S. in some sort of way if they renege on their deal. And so I just don't understand how this is going with the Republican goal, the long-term Republican goal of sticking it to Iran. This seems to be doing the exact opposite. And arguably, this could be seen as a win for Iran and a loss for the U.S. I just don't understand. I just don't understand the point of all this. It seems like there was clearly no plan, and it seems very clear that the whole point of this is to get the global oil market stabilized, to get U.S. domestic oil prices and gas prices specifically down to what they would be otherwise without the war, so that people, whenever they go to vote in the midterms in 4, 5, 6 months, that because most people have such short-term memories, they just, it's looks more favorable to the Republicans. Because I saw, as far as I saw recently, like people's domestically in the U.S. polling shows that people's happiness and satisfaction with what this administration and government has been doing over the last, since they took office in 2024, is like one of the lowest that it's ever been in U.S. history or whatever. And so like, I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to stabilize gas prices in the U.S. Then like they're either able to spin this as a W in whatever mechanism they're able to do it. It helps Republican electoral results by a couple of percentage points, right? Would not surprise me one bit. And that seems very clearly what is the goal of all of this. And that's why I keep saying, right, if they have the 60-day window or 90-day window or whatever for negotiations for the nuclear parts of this agreement, for other parts of this agreement, that like, but they have the ability to extend that 60-day window if they both mutually agree, that they're going to just keep extending that window, for 6 months until after the midterms are over. And then the whole thing might fall apart again because the whole point was not actually to give these ceasefire conditions that are favorable to Iran, but to help Republican and the Trump administration's and conservatives' electoral chances domestically in the U.S. come the midterms in November. So I don't know. And I just have a hard time believing like Iran is good faith in all of this, right? There's no way they suddenly just saw the light as far as like nuclear disarmament goes and like, oh guys, we're suddenly all for getting rid of our nuclear program and not trying to go for a nuclear weapon anymore. And like, oh, nuclear weapons are bad. Like there's no way that that's where they're coming from, right? And so like, yeah, there's another story I just saw come across my feed just like earlier today that says like CIA Director John Ratcliffe told President Trump and other senior officials that evidence gathered by U.S. intelligence agencies raises serious doubts about Iran's willingness to make the nuclear concessions the U.S. is seeking in any final deal, according to 3 sources familiar with those decisions, right? This totally makes sense to me, right? That they aren't actually in a good faith interested in doing what's laid out in the agreement, that they understand that they hold more cards in this situation, that they fully understand what this administration is seeking out of a ceasefire, right? They're increased electoral chances come the midterms in 5-6 months, and that they hold more cards in that regard, and that they have no intention of actually following through with a number of these parts of the agreement, especially the nuclear one, right? And if we can't even get the nuclear concessions, right, because that's the only thing people could come to me with, right? If all of those, if the agreement worked out and all of the 14 points came through, and yeah, it costs us a bunch of money. Yeah, it was kind of a loss in some ways, but at least we got nuclear weapons out of the hands of Iran, right? And that's a W, right? And I could maybe very slightly agree with you because like nuclear weapons in the hands of Iran is really bad. They're a crazy theocratic dictatorship that like, totally could be all for just martyrdom, and I don't know if they would adhere to the concept of mutually assured destruction in the same way that a place like Russia might. But yeah, if you can't even get the nuclear weapons completely or and some sort of serious assurance and knowledge that like nuclear weapons are out of the hands of Iran and their ability to create them in the future is squashed and non-existent, and that they have no interest internally to do that sort of thing, right? There's really is no W to all of this, right? It really is just a win for Iran and an L for the U.S. and Israel. And a potentially just a straight up surrender, depending on how you want to interpret it. So, yeah. And also, like, huge grain of salt with all of this, right? This is like the 6th ceasefire that they've had over the last however many months, right? The last one they claimed is still ongoing, even though that both Iran was shooting at U.S. air bases and like the Kuwait International Airport, they drone bombed it, and also the U.S. struck back at like certain military targets in Iran at the same time, right? This was just like 4 days ago, 5 days ago, or a week ago, or something like that, right? At the same time that they claimed that the ceasefire, this fifth or sixth ceasefire, was ongoing, the one that they're claiming is being extended into this proper final ceasefire agreement type thing. So, I'm huge grain of salt. I don't necessarily believe any of it's going to hold, or I don't have any faith that any of it's going to hold. Like, I hope that it holds. Obviously, I don't want war and I don't want people to die, but I don't have any faith that it's going to hold. And it would not surprise me one bit if they just sort of extend the negotiation period. They, more or less, the ceasefire happens. There's no more huge strikes that happen between now and the midterms. More or less, the ceasefire is agreed upon. But all of the details, especially regarding nuclear disarmament and whatnot, are the negotiation period is extended, past the midterms, and that all of this sort of just falls apart after the midterms, the beginning of 2027. Whatever it is no longer politically useful to find a ceasefire in the immediate future for the Trump administration and the conservative interests and Republican interests in the United States. And so we'll see. Only time will tell.